All right, so as you write out cards, just kind of wave them in the air, and Cole will grab those from you. We've got a couple questions here. We'll start off with first question. I think I'll direct this over to Emily. What is someone supposed to do to be?
I'm listening.
Are you listening? What's someone supposed to do to be influential if their representative or senator is one of the good guys?
That's an excellent question, especially we've already discussed tonight with some of our good guys here. Tell your friends. House districts are small, so they're relatively. So there's good chances that you have friends and family who they might live near you, especially in highly populated areas, but they don't share the same state rep or state senator that you do. Monitoring, you can sound the horn to your friends, your church members, your civic club buddies, your golfing buddies. You can sound the horn to them about what their state representative is doing. Is he a chairman of a committee who's not letting a pro-family, pro-life, pro-fiscal responsibility bill out of his committee? Or you can monitor those things and let people know. So I would encourage you to not to leverage your social networks if you are fortunate enough to be represented by someone who actually does what they say they're going to do, and don't sit back and say, oh well, stinks to be those guys down in Harris County. But I encourage you to be proactive and reach out and help educate, because that's why these leaders, I call that loosely leaders in Austin, get away with it, because you're educated during campaign season, but they bank on you being uninformed and uneducated during legislative season. And they'll come back and then say, well, I filed a bill. Well, anyone can file a bill. That's not how it works. And so don't let them bank on being uneducated electorates. So.
Thanks, Emily. All right, for Joanne Fleming, we're told the budget is balanced in Texas, so why is there so much debt?
Well, first of all, we actually only balance our budget on paper. Okay, now you understand that when you hear statewide officials and some of your state reps, not the two that are present here tonight, but the others, and some senators run around the state talking about a balanced budget. Well, jolly good for them. They have to balance the budget. It's a constitutional mandate. But let's talk very briefly about all the ways that you can balance a budget. You can raise taxes, you can raise fees, you can institute new taxes, institute new fees. My favorite is cutting spending. Or you can use something that I call the Medicaid credit card. You can, know that you're going to have 24 months of spending, but only fund about 18 months of it, so that when they get down to Austin, they've got bills they've got to pay that they didn't cover in the budget. That's another way. Another thing is they use accounting gimmicks and deferrals. They will push forward one calendar day into the next biennium so that they don't have to count something like school foundation funding, which they did during the 82nd session. So you've got that going on, that we aren't really balancing our budget the way that we should. The reason that we get into borrowing too much money is because, first of all, they sell it down there. The lobbyists sell it because it's cheap money now. Second thing is, we're spending money on a lot of duplicated departments, agencies, and programs, and spending outside of the core constitutional functions of state government. Hello, Enterprise Fund. Hello, Emerging Technology Fund, and Formula One, which we found out just a couple of weeks ago that a $250 million contract is based on nothing but a handshake. Is that how you want your business done in Austin, Texas? I don't think so. That's how, Michael.
Thanks. How do you really feel about the problem? Don't hold back. It's emotionally good for you. Okay. All right, next question I think I'll throw at Kathy Adams. The person with the question says that they feel like the Republican Party of Texas has sold Texans out on the issue of illegal immigration. What can be done to stop the sellout of our country?
Number one, during the next legislative session, I did introduce this already, but we'll say it again. We've got to do away with sanctuary cities. That's the easiest thing. And it's got to be a mandate, and it's got to come from us. They will not do it. We are going to have to insist upon it. Secondly, Joanne and I were on a trip down to the border just a couple of months ago. And it is worse, folks, than what we are being told. And now to have a man on a plane from Liberia who carries a woman who then later dies with Ebola, then goes to Belgium, and then goes to Washington, D.C., and then comes to DFW, then goes to Presbyterian Hospital in Dallas, and they release him, and then he gets back in there with full-blown Ebola. We have got issues coming from the White House, of course, that are not being taken care of. That resulted from Barack Obama doing away with the regulations that were in place in 2008 because he thought they were discriminatory. So, yes, we do have issues there, but it is wrong for any politician, including the governor of Texas, to say, I've sent the National Guard down there, I've sent the Texas Guard down there. Folks, they're only going to a very tiny part of that border. Our border is not secure. And furthermore, those men and women are not empowered to do a diddly thing. We saw a woman dropped off with her young child off of a ski jet, walk up the bank of the Rio Grande, and just walk a little bit, maybe not even a half block, and Border Patrol agents came, picked her up, put her in their air-conditioned cab, gave her cold water, and offered her and her little girl a snack. That's what's going on at our border. So that's why you have got to be so impassioned about saying, do away with sanctuary cities, period.
Thank you. All right, for David Walls. How can you convince a moderate to prioritize the issue of life? In 30 seconds, go.
Are we talking about anyone particular? Or?
Kathy.
No, on the issue of life, and that's an issue that that's one of our foundational issues, and that we've worked on for a long time. You cannot be a conservative. You cannot share the values we have if you do not value life. Period. And so I would say that if you're trying to convince someone that they need to stand for life, then you need to remove them from office, period. So, we certainly take an approach, and I think, organizations here have done that, where we will work with people, and we do everything we can to take every inch we can on the issue of life until the day comes that Roe v. Wade is overturned and we can do away with abortion altogether. And we want to take every inch that we can. But I don't think that life, especially if someone claims to be a Republican, is an issue that we can compromise that much on at all. So,
may I add one thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Recruit an opponent and work hard against them.
All right, Emily, should death panels be outlawed in Texas? And why don't you first explain to the folks who know that, when we say death panels, what does that mean?
Excellent question.
And then should they be outlawed?
It's been the law since 1999 in Texas that if a hospital decides that they do not want to treat you any longer, they can convene a meeting with whomever. It can be the dog catcher, the clergy of their choosing. It can be a social worker, whomever. And they're going to have a meeting and discuss whether the doctor who wants to remove you from your treatment is right or whether you're right. And when they make that decision, which is always in favor of the doctor, they tell you, we made this decision, you've got 10 days to find another facility. If you don't find a facility in 10 days, sorry. And that the treatment we're talking about here includes dialysis, includes artificial hydration in water, and it also includes do not resuscitate orders. And I can tell you from personal experience that in the past 4 weeks, Texas Right to Life has worked on 5 cases from Dallas to Houston, all across the state, just in this small amount of time, trying to work on these death panels. And every legislative session, Texas Right to Life tries to champion to change the law. And Representative Click actually has authored and fought fiercely for a bill to outlaw do not resuscitate orders without your consent. And once again, those didn't get to the floor. And so yes, we believe that these death panels, we saw this in Obamacare, and what people didn't understand was that Texas has been operating like this since 1999. You just don't know about it because these families are emotionally distraught, and you're in this situation, and where do you turn, what do you do, and then afterwards, you've lost your loved one, and it's just, you're grieving, and so the general public didn't know about how bad the problem is. And so, yes, Texas Right to Life vehemently does not like death panels, and every session, and we will renew our attempts to ensure that a do not resuscitate order cannot be placed in your file unless you or your surrogate decision maker consents, and that life-sustaining treatment, however defined, cannot be removed without your consent as well.
We'll move on to the next question I have. I just want to follow up with Emily because this issue is one that has was front and center during the legislative session with Senate Bill 303, legislation that would have, in a lot of ways, made this problem worse. But demonstrating the games that are played in Austin versus the things that are said at home. There is a soon-to-be former state senator by the name of Bob Deuel, who he was one of the ringleaders on Senate Bill 303. He fought hard against Texas Right to Life position, and by the way, a position that all of our groups took in opposing SB 03, and groups that aren't with us this evening in opposing SB 03. Texas Right to Life put an ad on several radio stations noting that Bob Deuel was supporting this bad legislation. Bob Deuel responded by threatening the radio stations. And the radio stations pulled the ad down. Texas Right to Life had to go get lawyers and other things, put the ads back up. That pesky First Amendment just gets in the way of politicians wanting to get work done. So now Texas Right to Life, to their credit, Bob Deuel lost. Yay, good thing. But to their credit, Texas Right to Life didn't say, we'll take the win and walk away, because they're suing Bob Deuel for violation of their First Amendment rights and and hopefully that's going to send a message to some of these other elected officials that when you start trying to use your power and your influence to shut up critics, we're going to start fighting back. We're going to stop letting these guys intimidate us. So hats off to Texas Right to Life for being able to do that. Now, the other funny thing I would note to you, again, as it relates to kind of First Amendment related issues, a lot of us have kind of been willfully ignorant of the threats to our First Amendment rights. We all have thought, oh well, with Lois Lerner gone, the federal government's not going to be coming after us anymore, and they may or may not. But I'd suggest to you that our threat as Texans is still there's a very active threat to us as Texans coming from the Texas Ethics Commission, where an agency that is trying very hard to pass rules to either shut people up or at least open you up to intimidation, like Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Mozilla, was forced out of his job because he was pro-traditional family. Texas Right to Life has had a complaint filed against them related to that same ad because their ad said this ad was paid for by Texas Right to Life, the name they've been known by for 42 years. the person who is Bob Dewell's chief of staff going to a state agency to get them to shut them up. Think about that for a minute. He said, well, they should have said paid for by Texas Right to Life Committee because that's their full legal name. Just crazy, just silly. And so those are the kind of games that the politicians will play with their friends in the agencies. I'd suggest to you that an issue that kind of generally rests outside of all of our thought is the ability to speak, the ability to engage, freedom of press, the right to petition our government. If we lose the right to criticize our elected officials, if it is made more difficult to criticize those who we place in office, I would suggest to you the life issue goes away, the taxpayers issue, all those things we start losing if we can't speak about them. So as you're thinking about life issues, you're thinking about taxpayer issues, make sure you're also thinking about the ability to engage on those issues fundamentally. Ann Heitinger, what is the probability that Scott Turner will withdraw from the speaker's race if he doesn't have, if somebody doesn't have votes to win? We need to force a vote, not like last session, is what this card said.
Zero. Zero. In fact, yesterday I asked his chief of staff that very question. I said, are we sure? She said, looked me in the eye and she said, and there is no way it is going to the floor. And I say, hallelujah. That's good.
Thank you, Roger. Joanne Fleming. Here's this one. What should we be looking at? What should we be? It's getting later. My arms aren't as long, and my glasses are in my car. Sorry. What should we be looking at with Prop 1? Does TxDOT need this money?
I will repeat to you all exactly what I said to the chairman of the Senate Transportation Committee when he came to Tyler to see me about Prop 1. I said, Senator, I could be more sympathetic to your cause if I trusted the people that are spending the money, but I don't. And you see, there's a lot of good reasons not to trust the way your transportation dollars are being spent. I mean, when we start spending dollars, tax dollars, transportation dollars on things like studying driverless vehicles, hovercraft, jetpacks, and that kind of nonsense, and in my county, wanting to spend $400,000 to take old railroad lines and make those into bike and hiking trails, I have to tell you, we've lost our way on transportation. Not to mention the fact, for example, out in El Paso, there are cases all over this state where they've decided that trolley cars and street cars and light rail and all these, space age ways of transportation are more important than taking care of the highways and byways we have now, the infrastructure we have now, and taking care of congestion. So I got to tell you, we also need to end diversions, all of the diversions on the gas tax. I mean, because before last session, about 47% of that had been diverted to non-road use. So I'm just going to tell you, TxDOT needs a good scrubbing, and I will say it, fumigating. We need to get out all the pesky little people in there that want to waste our tax dollars. We need to get those reforms in place, and then I'll be more sympathetic to looking at how much they actually need to do the job. But when your baseline budget comes out of both the House and the Senate, and it doesn't include any additional funding for transportation and none for water, and they want to raid your rainy day fund for it, spending's out of control. So until I trust the people that are spending our money, until I can sit here and look every one of you in the eye and say they're doing the best job they can with the dollars they already have, I'm not ever going to say yes to it, Michael, and I submit that y'all shouldn't either. And I'm a PAC. My group's a PAC, so I can say that.
Thank you, I appreciate that. David, conservative groups are having a difficult time using churches as meeting places due to harassment or threats of harassment by the IRS against them. What can we do legally to combat this? To counter this?
Threats to churches.
They don't any more violent than I need to be with whoever's question it was.
Yeah. Does anyone know how many churches have lost their tax exempt status from the IRS? Zero. That's an important fact to remember. We go back to the founding of our country. If it wasn't for the church and for pastors being engaged and being the public place where important political issues were discussed, we wouldn't have the country that we have today. So it's foundationally important that we protect the rights of churches to be that place. And I submit to you that so many of the problems that we have are because churches have pulled back from that place for a variety of reasons. But let me share just a couple of other threats that we deal with, not just from the IRS, but there's these other organizations now. Some of y'all are probably familiar with the ACLU. The more recent one out of Wisconsin, the Freedom From Religion Foundation. They have a mode of operation where they essentially are going around and sending threatening letters to not just to churches, but to governmental meetings, commissioner courts meetings. We've dealt with issues all over the state on this, where they're essentially threatening, saying you can't pray, you can't acknowledge God in any of these kinds of meetings. And we encourage folks to just to really understand what the law is with this. And if you do have, not to shamelessly plug, but if you do have a specific religious liberty issue where y'all are being attacked, I highly encourage y'all to reach out to the Liberty Institute. So their sole focus now is 100% on religious liberty issues around the country. And there is not a day goes by where they're not having to directly protect churches and just their right to exist, their right to expand. Here in the Dallas area, even they've been involved in some issues where you've had some local municipalities using different zoning laws that where they try to specifically apply to churches in ways that they don't apply to any other business. So any of those types of issues, highly encourage you to get in contact with the Liberty Institute. But as we are now approaching 33 days from Election Day, I encourage y'all to pray. Yes, amen. Pray. But to encourage your church, encourage your pastor in a loving way to engage. Host. We've got one Sunday left before the end of voter registration. Encourage your church just to have a table, just some sort of acknowledgement that there's an election, and encourage those folks to register to vote. And then once we get past that, a number of groups here put out voters guide. We put out one of the most widely distributed statewide voters guides in the state. I have a flyer about it in the back, but the website is just simply freevotersguide.com. where we provide information on where all the candidates stand on the issues, how they voted on different issues, even information about where they got their campaign contributions from, just a host of information that for folks, a lot of folks here pay attention to what's going on. But for folks who just need a quick snapshot to be encouraged to go vote and to get an idea of where the candidates really stand on the issues, I highly encourage y'all to take use of that resource and to engage your church in that effort.
Next question is, how are Texas Alliance for Life and Texas Right to Life different? I'm going to let Emily answer that programmatically for once, but I'll offer as someone who's not involved with those groups, kind of give you my own perspective, that's okay. When I look at those two organizations, one of them has endorsed liberals and supports Joe Strauss, who is also supported by NARL. The other one supports conservatives. Texas Right to Life supports the conservatives, and Texas Alliance for Life is out supporting Joe Strauss, the guy who Gnarl gives 100% rating to. They took $50,000 from John Corona, who was defeated over in Dallas County, the second most liberal Republican in the Senate. They took $50,000 from him, spun it around, and then spent $50,000 on him, talking about what a great pro-life leader he was. Texas Alliance for Life, whatever else they may or may not do, they have been giving a lot of cover to bad guys, claiming that these bad guys are good guys. That's just dead wrong. I would also note that Sid Miller, who is going to be Texas' next Ag Commissioner, he was in the Texas House. He was the author of the sonogram legislation. During that legislative session, Sid Miller saw an opportunity to strengthen the sonogram bill over the objections of Joe Strauss. Well, Texas Alliance for Life said, no, don't strengthen it. Don't make it better. Texas Alliance for Life said, don't make it better to Sid Miller. Sid Miller said, hey, I've got the opportunity. He made it better. It passed, went into law. It's now the law of the state of Texas. Texas, as retribution, Texas Alliance for Life refused to endorse him in his re-election effort for the Texas House, and then actively worked against him in his Ag Commissioner race. Again, these folks claim to support life. It sounds all like they're supporting the establishment more than they're supporting the cause of life. But on substantive policy issues, outside of my emotional rant there, Emily, what would be some of the differences?
Well, first off,
when you get to stand up with a microphone, you get to babble a little bit. Sorry.
First of all, we at Texas Right to Life would never purport to say or try to surmise what speak for another organization. So I'm not going to try to do that tonight. But what I will tell you is some difference on policy issues. My whole spiel a minute ago about death panels, Texas Right to Life and Texas Alliance for Life, it became very obvious last session that we take two different stances on that issue. So that's one difference. Second, with elections, there was a House District race, Bennett Ratliff versus Matt Rinaldi, and the incumbent Bennett Ratliff was captured on camera at a campaign stop saying, well, I believe that it's a medical procedure that every woman should have access to on camera. Texas Alliance for Life endorsed Bennett Ratliff. Texas Right to Life did not, and luckily his opponent, Matt Rinaldi, is now going to be sitting in that House seat come next session. I was going to touch on the Sid Miller issue, but Michael did that. There's just been differences in endorsements. I don't know what their endorsement process is or anything like that, but there are just differences in the type of candidates and the type of candidates that each organization endorses and has a working relationship with. And one of those would be kind of somewhere around here. I think it's Jason Bialba was captured on Texas Tribune saying that while he's pro-life, he doesn't think that issue should come to the floor next session. And we have lots of plans for next session, including making sure that our parental consent law is actually getting parental consent before a minor undergoes an abortion. There are still, while we had great gains in 2011 of diverting taxpayer funds from abortion industry, our legislative team has found a few more revenue streams that are smaller but nonetheless need to be dealt with that we'll be working on. And those are issues that we at Texas Right to Life think are good enough to be brought to the floor, and we're not just going to shut up and go home. So, there we go.
And only about half of the Christians in the United States, church-going Christians in the United States, bother to register to vote, and even fewer than show up. How would Concerned Women for America, how would Ann Hettinger say we should go about encouraging those folks to show up to the polls? Presuming, of course, they're going to vote right if they show up.
I don't know what it's like in your church, in the hierarchy of your church. But within the church that I attend, we have what we call the Ethics and Religious Liberty Committee in our church. And that church looks at the cultural issues and tries to keep the congregation informed about them. And in so doing, it educates the people to what's going on. You know, you can watch the news, but you don't get the news, really. So this committee in my church watches the cultural issues and you know, come to people like me and says, what's going on in the legislature? I give them my input and keep the people informed. And you know this, you know that when you get fresh information about something and it's talked about, you know that there begins to be a buzz going on in that group of people, and they become interested in, and then they, just like the Tea Party, just like you did, you got all concerned about something, you learned about it, it was fresh and new, and you said, somebody's got to do something about it. That's what you have to do in your church. You've got to know about the issues. You've got to go tell somebody. If you can recruit the pastor, I have a wonderful pastor who stands in the pulpit and talks about these things. And that's wonderful. Some of us have that kind of pastor. I know of one here in this Metroplex area, right down the road here on 157, and he does the same thing. There are pastors around who do that. There are some who do not. But even if you're in a church that does not, we can have prayer action chapters. That's what Mary does. Mary goes around and she goes to the various groups around and she starts prayer action chapters. They learn about educate, pray, and act. EPA, our own little CWA EPA. Educate, pray, and act. You can do that in your congregation. And if you want to learn how to start a prayer action chapter, we'll get you in touch with Mary or with me and we can do that. But you're going to have, if the Christians, listen to me, if the Christians don't start standing up, we can kiss America goodbye. You know that, and I do too. So you're going to have to take your role. You're going to have to take it seriously. You're going to have to say, yes, I can. Yes, I can go speak to a group of people. Yes, I can go speak to the pastor. Yes, I can go speak to the elder or the deacon or whomever it is. I can do that. You can do that. And I encourage you to do it.
Thank you, Kennard. We've got lots of questions here, but because of our time, I'm going to do last two very directed questions and then a third kind of gotcha question for everyone on the panel. So the directed question to Kathy Adams: how can Sharia, thank you. As an Aggie from Ireland, I don't do some of these words very well. How can Sharia law be kept out of our state?
Sharia law can be kept out of our state by passing American law for American courts, a piece of legislation that would become a law in the state of Texas. Right now what is happening is that we have more mosques in the state of Texas than any other state in the country. And we have a Muslim couple, for example, will go to one of our JPs, our Justice of the Peace, and present a situation, knowing full well that that situation is not covered under the laws of our country or our state. And the JP then says, oh, well, you need to go down the hallway or down the road to that Sharia court. And so they're getting a referral. This is very real that it is happening. In the United Kingdom, in London, there were many who thought, well, we can just set up parallel courts. And they began doing that more and more. And now they have had some of the most horrendous things happening all over the UK because of these liberal laws. People thinking, well, we can move, we can move, we can move. That's why Bridget Gabriel started ACT in the United States in order to bring to us what her experience was when the Lebanese said, oh yeah, well, the PLO have been thrown out of Jordan, we'll take them into our country, and you know, we're Christians, we're multicultural, we'll all get along fine as one big happy family. It didn't work. Look what's going on today. Lebanon doesn't own anything. It's all run by Syria, and of course all of this war that Barack Hussein Obama is helping. I wanted to add one thing though, and I promise I will try to behave here, but when you were asking about Texas Alliance for Life, whoever asked that question, I understand. Not only was the death panel bill their #1 agenda last legislative session, but it is the next legislative session #1 item as well. So please be forewarned and forearmed and work with Texas Right to Life And don't be taken in by those who say, oh, that's really not a death panel bill. It is. It is. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kathy. For Joanne Fleming, what's happening with toll roads and how can their proliferation be stopped?
Well, in your own communities, I'm going to say this. There is a new plan afoot in some parts of the state where they're telling you that a private company is going to be able to do these toll roads, and it's not going to be the same. It's not going to be the same multi-leveraging, all the creative financing. But you need to understand this. Private companies have no business having the power of eminent domain.
Yep.
I'm going to say it again. Private businesses have no business being able to take private property through eminent domain. We've got to stop this. Now on toll roads, because of the research that Chris Paxton with Empower Texans has done a lot of great research and is networking with other people who are involved with trying to ferret out the truth about how transportation is handled and how the toll roads are against liberty. He has come up with how actually Prop 1 money, they've told you Prop 1 money can never be used for toll roads. Well, here's how it happens. That pot of money gets divided up and it goes into your regional mobility authorities. There's no language in there that says the RMAs can't use that money for toll roads. Need to understand that. Once it gets to that local decision making, that's where they use all the creative financing. So I will tell you, we the people have to stop it. Now I will tell you, General Abbott said he wants to change the way we do transportation in the state of Texas. He wants to get to pay as you go. Dan Patrick has said he wants to get away from toll roads and get to pay as you go. I submit to you, we need to hold everybody to their campaign promises. Okay? Because I'm just going to say it to you straight. Until we start doing what I used to do in private practice, I hired slow, but I fired fast. Because if you got somebody who says they're going to do a job, and let me tell you, when you go and vote for people, you are hiring them to do a job. If they don't do the job, you need to fire them and put somebody else in there. Because I submit to you, the reason that we have Republicans running amok is because we've let them stay in office too long. Okay, so we the people have the ability, but you have to call. You have to be informed about these issues and call your elected officials, because the tolling lobbyists are running and crawling all over the Capitol. All the toll road companies, all their representatives crawling all over the Capitol. And they're saying, this is the only way. This is the only way. Well, let's get back to what Chris Paxton wrote an article about this week. Reform first. Fix transportation first. Let's clean it up first. And then we'll see how much money they really need.
Thank you, Joanne. All right, so here is the kind of our parting question. Please, there's lots of snacks over here, so after this question, attack. They're all yours. Just go in. A lot of questions we couldn't get to. All right. Which thing you kept on? Please identify by name the bad Republicans who are holding up conservative issues.
All
I'll actually go first, just because I've been sitting there staring at the card going, oh, this is fun. I'll actually go first because a couple minutes, and who knows, maybe I'll take some heat off of you. I would look right here in Tarrant County, just a little bit to the west where we are. Charlie Guerin, one of the guys who is constantly working against the policy positions that conservatives hold most dear. He's the one taking a baseball bat to kneecaps of freshman lawmakers. He's the one who's trying to hold up legislation near and far in the Texas House. The Texas Senate, a bad actor I would point you to is a guy named Kel Seliger from Amarillo, Texas. He now occupies the dubious spot of being the most liberal Republican in the Texas Senate, according to every study that's done, from conservative end to nonpartisan and others. And sadly, he's in for 4 more years. But I would suggest those are 2 folks who stand in the way. I think that over in Dallas County, his name was mentioned a few minutes ago, Jason Villalba, a freshman member who went out and boldly said, hey, you don't have to worry about all these conservatives elected to the Texas Senate because Joe Strauss, if he's still Speaker, he will stop all of that conservative slash and burn legislation. So, I'd say that's another guy in the way. But I'll see if anyone else has anyone they want to chime in and talk about. Joanne Fleming sitting here pulling out her naughty list. So I think she'll be...
Well, it's a long list. I'm going to add to Mr. Guerin and to Mr. Viaba a couple of names. Byron Cook, State Affairs, bad actor. Bad actor. And if he was sitting right there, I'd be telling him, you're a bad actor and you need to go. Also Todd Hunter. And Mr. Hunter is wooing the Tea Party groups in the Corpus Christi area and saying he's one of them. But I have to tell you that the games that Todd Hunter plays in the Calendars Committee with the State Affairs Committee, they have this little thing going where Todd will call you and he'll say, Joanne, as soon as they get that bill to me, I promise you it's going to go to the floor. Well, it's like the paperwork. It takes them 2 weeks to get the paperwork over to the Calendars Committee. So I'm just saying, their records are what they are. And we're going to be watching them again. But we're saying this all over the state. So in those districts, if you all are blessed with good constitutional conservatives that you don't have to worry about and you don't need to fire them, please help your neighbors across the state that have Republicans that need to be fired, and let's go help them do that.
I'm sad to tell you that there are some Republicans in this North Texas area who are opposing Scott Turner. Oh, they're for us on everything else, but they don't have the courage to support Scott Turner. So that's who. Well, there are a few. I'll call one name: Ron Simmons, sweet man, wonderful man, supports us on all the things. He will not support Scott Turner. So I could name others, but I'm going to let you go to your representative and talk to him about supporting Scott Turner. But if we don't change that speaker, because the speaker appoints the committee chairs. So Byron Cook is going to stay the State Affairs Committee chairman as long as Joe Strauss is the speaker. And as long as that twosome works and Charlie Guerin's on that State Affairs Committee, trust me, we don't get anything done. So, well, I gave you one name. Ron Simmons that I know. That's the only one I'm confident of telling you about.
I'm just going to reiterate that the pro-life bills get to hang out a long time in state affairs committees, and then they get to hang out some more in calendars committees if they ever get through the state affairs threshold. So I would just reiterate that point.
Well, they wanted names. Did you want to mention names? Oh, okay. All right. I would add one other in the state senate to the list, and that's Kevin Eltai from Tyler, Texas. He is very much a rhino, and we're ready for him to retire or something. He schmoozes, talks a good talk, but votes like a liberal, and very well funded. So, in other words, he's working for a moneyed interest. He's not working for the people in his district, which is very sad. As far as House members, I invite you, of the 150, to go to our website, which is texaseagle.org, And we have a scorecard from this last legislative session. Stephanie Click and Jonathan Stickland, A grades. I mean, they're awesome. But do go to the scorecards. And Michael Quinn Sullivan did something recently that was fabulous. If any of you were at the conservative celebration, it was so well done. Michael was asked to present whether those that we were celebrating had more than rhetoric, were their records actually conservative. And he took about 4 or 5, I think, different scorecards, including ours and his and Young Conservatives for Texas and a couple others, and presented the overall scores. And it's amazing how we don't work together on that project. We take different votes, and yet they're consistent across the board. And we do social and economic issues, but I do invite you to go there and find out how your guys are doing and talk to them about it. And if you cannot sit down and reason with them, then please, sometimes it means the ultimate sacrifice, finding someone to challenge them in the next primary. Or sometimes it means even putting your name on there, on the ballot.
I had a thought, just a second. There is, on the life issue, there is a pro-choice Republican. I'm sorry, I don't like to use the word pro-choice because, anyways, there is an anti-life Republican out of Harris County, Sarah Davis. She proudly votes against the sonogram law, and she's close with those in power, and she's rising fast, and that is a concern for us. And so that is, if you have Harris County friends, that is definitely one area to look at.
Well, I feel like I'm going to be beating a dead horse a little bit, but I would, on one of the key issues that we worked on that I talked about at the very beginning, strengthening religious liberty protection to our highest level. Again, that bill died in the State Affairs Committee last time, both in the House and the Senate. In 2011, when it actually got to the floor of the House, Charlie Guerin rose to speak against the bill and gave somewhat of a rambling speech about apparently why having too much religious freedom is a bad thing. I would think our founders, who put religious freedom as the first part of the First Amendment, might disagree a little bit with that. So I would just echo that and encourage folks. I'll just take this opportunity to share just a final thing that I think is related to this, that we are past the point where we can have elected officials, leaders who just talk the talk. There is a large difference between those that claim that they're pro-life and that who will actually push for pro-life legislation when it matters. I mean, as Emily just said, I think there's only one Republican who claims that they're claims to be openly anti-life. But was there that same amount who wanted to see that pro-life legislation was given a priority and didn't have to get pushed to the special session? Those two numbers are different. I would submit to y'all that there's some important issues coming up. The pro-life one will always continue to be. The other one will be on the issue of marriage. The leaders of the Republican Party at the national level are telling our people that we need to back off on these so-called controversial issues. We need to abandon the base of the party. And I submit to y'all that that is exactly the wrong thing to do. That we win when we paint boldly, when there's two choices, and that when we stand for the things that we really believe in. So I encourage everyone to really take a look at these folks' records and to always trust but verify. Don't take what they say in the campaign season. Verify that they were willing to lead. They were willing to sign on as a co-author. They were willing to do the things that actually show that they're committed to these issues, not just that they want to talk to you about them back when they're running for office.
I encourage you that as we move forward from this evening, again, help yourself some refreshments. Grab each one of us. Happy to chat, cover any questions we didn't have the time to get to. nothing is more effective than each one of us talking to our friends and our family members around the state. Samuel Adams is perhaps one of our most underappreciated of our founding fathers. His great contribution to the cause of liberty, and often unsung, was the development of the committees of correspondence. He knew that the provincial governor, the royal governor in one of the other colonies couldn't care less what he had to say because he's from Massachusetts. In fact, his own governor didn't care what he had to say in Massachusetts. But he knew that if he got folks from those communities writing notes to their own officials, that had a lot more weight than anything he would ever say. So he started those committees of correspondence. And I'd suggest to you that while it can be emotionally satisfying to write that nasty letter to someone from another part of the state, they don't care. They're not on your ballot. Call your friend from high school. Call your ex-girlfriend's brother's mom who lives in South Texas. Get back in touch with your Christmas card list, with the people on Facebook and other things. Remember, Sam Adams wrote thousands of letters at a time when you had to take a quill, dip it in ink, and scroll across a page. Today, you and I have these little devices we carry around that we can send thousands of emails while we're sitting at a stoplight. So I encourage you to take advantage of the opportunity you have to spread the message of liberty. That's how we win and how we continue to win. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.